Hello everyone, I'm Özge Özyurt. Today I'm gonna tell you about the article of Bryan Palmer titled Reconstructions of Class, Precariousness as Proletarianization. It was written in 2014, but the language belongs to the previous century. Really hard one to read. Palmer is a Canadian historian and a professor at Queen University, Ontario. In this article, he examines the class formations under Marxist analogy and then defines a new working subclass of the precaria. Precaria means very basically as the vulnerably, insecurely employed. So we are looking at blue-collar blues periods. It was an uprising against the capital holders who were squeezing the working class under the Fordist regime, namely in the assembly lines. However, after 1960s, working class began to make their voice loud and clear. Firstly, the Socialist Register journal in UK came about when the Labour Party in power, and they were trying to implement a program for socialist advance. And then there were wildcat waves, meaning some discontent among labor circles, both in US and Canada, and the strikes at General Motor plants in Ohio by the United Auto Workers was really symbolic, and whereas in Detroit gave birth to the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and also Ben Hamper's Rivethead book, its Tales from the Assembly Line, was the bestseller of the era. So let's take a close look at what is blue collar.
A lot of people wonder, what is the blues? I hear a lot of people saying the blues. But I'm going to tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money to pay your house rent, you still got the blues. A lot of people holler about, I don't like no blues, but when you ain't got no money and can't pay your house rent and can't buy you no food, you damn sure got the blues.
I hope we would all continue the video with a sacred working class soul embedded in our body. So, the period between 1965 and 1974 was unfortunately defined as the labor's last stand. After 1975, we are witnessing a declining material standards of working class. Trade unions became tool of concession bargaining. Creation of young workers robbed of a sense of class place. Precarious employment processes began. And Mike Davis, this is my favorite quote in the article. He says 200 million Chinese factory workers, miners, construction laborers are the most dangerous class on the planet. So we are experiencing the defeat of the working class who has lost their consciousness of the power of unification. This quotation shows the ongoing optimism about working class, but there are also many reasons for pessimism about whether or not a socialist earth is possible. International Labour Organization has recently estimated that there are 1.4 billion workers who are totally dependent on wage labor for subsistence. Extending this reserve with more than 200 million unemployed, we have an astronomical 1.7 billion workers which can be defined as vulnerably employed. Considerable portion of this army is wageless, living on illicit endeavors. We can associate the kind of life standards of those living in favelas in Latin America, barrios in Asia, and shanty towns of Africa. Davis called it global informal working class, as a socio-economic stratum now surpasses 1 billion in number, making it the fastest growing, most unprecedented social class on earth. The thesis statement of this article is that precariousness of the proletariat is antagonistic to foundational Marxist understandings and will have divisive and counterproductive consequences in terms of struggle and practice. We will look at how it is different from foundational Marxist analogy and what will be the consequences of thinking precaria as a different class. When we think about precariousness as a feature for building up a new social class, we should turn to Guy's standing, defining it as the precaria is in the front ranks of our work and everyday life. But the precaria is not the squeezed middle or lower class. So there is a hierarchy of differentiated class formation which is favored by neoliberal global economy. On the one hand, the old Fordist regime factory-driven accumulation, and the other, routine employment as 9 to 5 undertaking, which we call blue and white collar today. The working class identity of being a transformative agent of social relations of exploitation and oppression is now ended. Here, standing posits a ladder of stratification that orders the lower classes of contemporary society into distinct components. First, the manual working class, second, army of the unemployed, third, the social misfits, and the fourth and the most important, the youth-dominated precaria, the true dangerous class of modern society. As a separate youth-led precaria emerges as a distinct class force, according to Standing, it will scale the heights of new mobilizations, creating struggles and corresponding slogans that leave older injunctions such as "Workers of the World Unite" discarded as useless impediments. I think he emphasizes that it is not realistic anymore. All workers does not coalesce and form up a strong body. The precaria now resenting their elders because of the dismantling of public sector, rising black markets and their living off with lavish pensions, etc. So conclusion is the precaria is not victim, villain or hero. It is just a lot of us. So the precaria seems positive and utopian when defining, but it is actually dividing and fragmenting the working class, the forces of anti-capitalism. After 1980s, the revolutionary left largely had been pacified. There are only few examples in Europe, and the precariat movement visible in Portugal and Spain, where almost up to 40% of the workers are insecurely employed. But it is not enough. For Marxists, mobilizations of the precariat is heartening, but they believe that precariat is not a substitute for powerful coming together of all components of the working class. They resist the ideology of precariousness as a class formation. This is where it differs from foundational Marxist thinking. So let's look at how Marxists explained the class formation on the basis of dispossession. Dispossession was the fundamental feature of it. Marx declared in Capital that contradictions are inherent in capitalist society and constant changes in the periodic cycles of the bourgeois would eventually lead a universal crisis. So, capitalist progress is premised on capitalist destruction. Class formation of capitalism took place as it simplified the class antagonisms. Civil society was split into two great hostile camps, bourgeoisie and proletariat. Proletarians were brought together upon their lack of property. Marx and Engels insisted on that the proletarians, recruited from all previous classes of the population, were finally brought together in inevitable association because of what they lacked: property. Class formation is based on expropriation and in the long term by the continuity of dispossession. The reproduction of a mass labor power which is continuously incorporating itself with capital for the expansion of capital, which also cannot get free from capital, eventually results in the reproduction of capital itself, meaning accumulation of capital is increase of the proletariat. So, dispossession is the basis of all proletarianization, and only socialism can end this cycle of dispossession, accumulation, crisis, and disorder. Christopher Hill describes the masterless masses as the surplus population that created the surplus out of which the capitalist class would coalesce. Working class being forged out of process of dispossession is also told by E.P. Thompson's The Making of the English Working Class, and he says a working class was made by industrial revolution and counter-revolution of property. Class differentiation is not something new, just like insecurity and precariousness. Dispossession defines proletarianization. It is a metaphorical mark on workers, regardless of their level of employment, rate of pay, status, and so on. Martin Glaberman, who is another Marxist analyst, he says in his essay on American working class in 1960s, industry does not replace man with machines. It discards men, move others in place, and bring others to the arena constantly. Harry Braverman adds to Glaberman that this continuous change is the reason for degradation of work in the 19th century. So again, we see this periodic cycle of dispossession and exploitation was the main element of proletarian class formation. And let's have a look at how Marx himself categorized proletariat within itself. the categorization of proletariat is not according to their waged work, but to the possible forms of surplus population: the floating, the latent, the stagnant. The lumpenproletariat is the result of Marx's moralistic judgments with respect to the most marginalized, often criminalized subcultures of the dispossessed. Marx did not aim to use this label as a way of separating lumpenproletariat out of the dispossessed. There are 4 points to highlight about it. First, Marx used it as an adjective for Bonaparte, showing a debasement, not a hardened class place. Second, actions of the lumpenproletariat are the lowest of the law acts, because they try to cast their political lot with the project of reaction and restoration of class privilege. Marx used the term as a way of labeling an individual or a social group as cheaters or disgusting. Third, the lumpenproletariat has come about because of the need of bourgeoisie to set one part of the proletariat against the other. Marx did not consider lumpenproletariat and proletariat as divided, but part of a continuum of the same dispossessed class. And the fourth, lumpenproletariat shows us the ways in which the dispossessed were victimized by capitalism's capacity to criminalize and punish the poor. If you still had questions about lumpenproletariat, I leave this caricature for the best description. So, what was done to the dispossessed by the need of the bourgeoisie? They criminalized their behaviors. They used the law as a vehicle for expanding dispossession, and the state were their servants. So there is a dual process in the creation of the proletariat: the free labor and the outlawed. So, how about today? Dispossession is accelerating on a global scale. Analytic thought of our times tends to highlight the divisions of the working class, like the precarious grouping of guys standing, not their unification points. Trade unions' incapacity to organize labor, they are useless. And the revolutionary left, they were never weaker than now. And eventually, working class more and more fractured against itself. So, understanding this tragic set of parallel trajectories, it is imperative that those on the socialist left reassert what is most solid in the Marxist tradition. So we should go back to Marxist tradition. What is more than ever needed is a politics of class that speaks directly to the betterment of humanity through insistence that the expropriated, the dispossessed, are as one in their ultimate needs. The reciprocal powers of the waged and the wageless must be organized and utilized to speak to debilitating consequences of precariousness, as well as the exploitative nature of all productions, payments, and prohibitions. Bryan Palmer finished his article with a quotation from East European dissident G.M. Tama by Vive le différence, no, vive le commune. And I am leaving here a song for you all to listen to revive your working class identity. Take care.